Hello, good morning, and welcome to this webinar from the Clean Air Zone team for you over at British Transport Police. It's just gone 10 o'clock, so I'll give it another minute or so. If somebody could just confirm that you can in fact hear us in the Q&A. My name's Peter Edwards, Principal Clean Air Zone Officer. We also have on the call Gareth Wood, who will begin the presentation. He's going to give you a bit of an overview about how the Clean Air Zone operates, why we're doing it, and then I'll come in. We will talk about the exemptions and the additional support that is available for people that live and work and operate in the Clean Air Zone. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. So there's a Q&A chat box within the Teams platform. Please post all your questions in there. I won't be able to see while we're presenting any of those questions until the end, so we're not ignoring you. We'll just pick that up at the end. Usual caveats apply that we are working from home. So Gareth has a dog and I have a small child. So if you hear any barking or crying, apologies, but this is the world we're currently living in. The webinar is being recorded. So if any of your colleagues can't join, then we can send that. We will send that round afterwards, so you don't need to make notes or anything like that. We'll send the slides, we'll send the link to the webinar, we'll put it on YouTube, so that information is all available for you. This is my first time being the producer of one of these, so setting the slides up and stuff, so apologies for any technical difficulties, but I can see that somebody has confirmed that you can in fact hear us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start sharing the slides, and so hopefully they will go full screen. Gareth, if they don't go full screen or anyone can't see them in the chat, just shout out, because I won't be able to see from now on. But I shall now hand you over to Gareth Wood.
Good morning all. Thank you. Thanks Pete. Thanks for attending today. Just wait for the slides to appear. Here they are. So yeah, thank you. As Pete had said, this is a webinar to provide information with regards to the reasons behind the launch of the Clean Air Zone, along with a general overview of how the zone will work, when it will commence, and some of the details there. So we'll begin with the background. So I'm keen not to just read through the slides that are on the screen, rather to provide a few key points from each slide and provide more of a general picture of the Clean Air Zone and the causes that have and the reasons that have led to the launch of a Clean Air Zone. So in the first slide, we can see via the graphic here some of the impacts of poor air quality. Probably key within this are the amount of deaths that are linked to man-made air pollution in Birmingham alone during the course of any given year. So with over up to 900 deaths and almost 1,000 per year, deaths that are directly linked to man-made air pollution and harmful emissions, or the level of harmful emissions in the city. I think we can all see and understand that's quite a startling figure to see. Additionally to that, we have a list there of diseases, critical illnesses that are linked to that, which do include, as you'd expect, diseases of a respiratory nature, including asthma, but broader illnesses also, including heart disease and a variety of cancers. Probably additionally very notable within this is the increased risk to children, which we can see is that children are 4 times as likely as adults to suffer from the effects of poor air quality. This is really just directly due to the fact that that children are lower to the ground, and so the level of emissions is increased the lower to the ground they go, which of course will affect children more. And key to that and important is the knock-on effect of how that then subsequently affects their futures. And in launching a Clean Air Zone, we're keen to provide a healthier, safer and improved future for residents and workers in the city. Along with that, again, without going through each part, we can see that 61% of journeys to work are by van or car. and accordingly people on the road are exposed to 21% higher levels of pollution, and that brings us to the bus and taxi drivers who for whom it's 3 times that amount. So I think from that, and as Pete said, we can go back and answer any questions at the end of this, but I think from the first slide we can see that the causes and generally the impact of high emissions and harmful emissions and poor air quality is clear. Can I have the next slide, please, Pete? So again, this leads us on a little bit more to a more detailed breakdown of the types of vehicular emissions. So we can see that there are 2.8 million journeys made by the residents of Birmingham each day, which is a huge amount, what we would expect for any major city, with 50% alone by car, which latterly will bring us on to the implementation of the type of clean air zone that we're using, and why we've gone with what will be known to you after this as a category D clean air zone. There are 250,000 car journeys made by Birmingham residents that are less than 1 mile, which, when you consider the layout of the city centre and the clean air zone, the idea of journeys that are under 1 mile that may take place through the clean air zone, and the complexity and difficulties around the type of roads that are contained within there and how people can travel throughout them, it's for me at least, it's quite startling to consider that so many of those journeys are actually less than 1 mile, which I think is, is probably for everyone to see. 1 mile on foot, for instance, in the city centre could potentially be something that's a lot quicker, depending on traffic and time of day, than a mile within a vehicle. So something to bear in mind there. Pete, can I have the next slide, please? And so we come on here to having come from the reasons for the implementation of a clean air zone, we come into how we as a city council plan to deliver the government mandated reduction in harmful emissions. And so there are varying types of clean air zone, and a question that comes up, or has come up quite often during the last year, is, for instance, when people use the vehicle checker, they wonder why their vehicle might be compliant in another clean air zone but not in Birmingham. The reason is that not every clean air zone that will be introduced is going to be the same category. So Birmingham, because of the level of harmful emissions and our requirement to lower those to a legally acceptable and healthy limit, we are implementing what's known as a category D clean air zone, which incorporates private vehicles, whereas I think you can see from the graphic there, in the other clean air zones, it may not include private vehicles. It may focus on freight, it may focus on taxis, public transport, but exclude private vehicles. We will be including them, and we'll get to those charges shortly. But I think the graphic here is, I think, is quite sort of straightforward. And let's just have a look. Yeah, so it's otherwise we just talk here about the geographic areas. For the purposes of our clean air zone, I think we come on to in the next slide or so, the actual area in and around the city centre, we'll go into a bit more detail around that. So yeah, here we go. So our clean air zone is all of the areas there within the A4540, excluding the ring road itself. You can see, I mean, it covers a wide range of areas within that part of the city centre. So there's a high level of residential areas, but also we have the main commercial hub for the city centre. So everything around the Bull Ring and shopping centres and districts within there. The type D clean air zone that we'll be implementing includes, for the purposes of a clean air zone, all vehicle types. So as I said earlier on, private vehicles, public transportation, freight. The charging period for a clean air zone, for our clean air zone, is 24 hours, and that charging period runs midnight to midnight each day. So a charge is only incurred once during that 24-hour period. So if a non-compliant vehicle a car, a taxi, a van, which would be chargeable to £8 per 24-hour period. For that amount, they can enter and exit and use the clean air zone as much as they wish to for that one single 24-hour charge. And the same is the case for Hgvs, which is coaches and buses, which would be £50 per day. With the charging period of midnight to midnight, it would mean that, for instance, if a vehicle that was non-compliant and subsequently chargeable entered the zone at 11 p.m. For whatever reason, and then left or came back through at 12:30, they would have actually incurred 2 charges, because they would have moved from the 24-hour charging period post midnight into the next 24-hour charging period, which is something for users with non-compliant vehicles to bear in mind, that would mean that they would incur 2 charges. Following on from that, we touch here upon the revenue generated. So any money that's accumulated from the charges incurred by non-compliant drivers for use of Birmingham's Clean Air Zone is going to be reinvested into things such as controlled parking zones, which are designed primarily to mitigate the impacts or localized impacts of the introduction of the clean air zone, funding for hydrogen bus pilots, and city centre pedestrianisation and public realm improvements. The idea of incurring the charges or the taking the money that's generated from the charges, it solely leads to the improvement and the broader improvement of transportation and pedestrianisation in the clean air zone in the wider city itself. It's essential really that any charges therein lead to these initiatives as part of the wider Birmingham transportation plan, which we can provide a link for in the chat. I'm not sure if it's actually on the slide, but which would give anybody who wants to investigate that further a much more detailed idea of what we're planning to do as a city council in order to improve things holistically a bit more. Thanks, Pete. Can I get the next slide?
I think that's me taking over. So thank you. Yeah, there is usually a slide to further reinforce the message that Gareth just touched upon, really, in terms of the fact that all revenue generated from the clean air zone is ring fenced by law, that can only be used to spend on public transport, sustainable travel methods like Gareth touched upon. It's also important to point out that if the clean air zone raises a lot of money, it's failed because nobody has changed their behaviour. So despite what you may see in the media about it being a congestion charge and a tax and this sort of thing, actually, if it makes a lot of money over a 5-year period, then the air quality will not have improved and we will have failed. So I think it's important to stress those facts. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Peter Edwards. So I'm Principal Clean Air Zone Officer, and I have overall responsibility for delivering the exemptions package within the Clean Air Zone programme. So we know that delivering the Clean Air Zone, we think, is the right thing to do. It needs to be done. Gareth's already touched on the health impacts that this is having on our city. But we also know that this is a new thing. Outside of London, we will be the 3rd clean air zone to go live. Theirs is called an ultra low emission zone, has been live for probably about 18 months. Bath will go live next month, and then we will go live on the 1st of June 2021. So we know this is a new thing, and potentially, especially in the current climate with COVID and the way the economy is going to be difficult for some people to adapt to. So in 2018, when the consultation for the clean air zone went out, there was, I think, some misinterpretation about what that consultation was, because it was never a consultation of shall we do a clean air zone, because that was mandated by government. We had to do a clean air zone. It was how should we do a clean air zone, and when it's implemented, who should gain the most support and be given exemptions and financial support. So that consultation was the most popular, well, most popular might not be the most responded to consultation the Birmingham City Council has ever done. Had something like 11,000 responses, and off the back of that, we've created a suite of kind of exemptions and additional measures to support the people that were identified as being the most likely to be impacted by this. So you can see on screen, first of all, the exemptions that we have on offer. So for the people on this call working in the city centre, the most relevant one is the 1 year exemption for what we call Clean Air Zone workers. So those are people that work in the Clean Air Zone, earn less than £30,000 a year and work for at least 18 hours a week in the zone. You can access a 1 year exemption. You may also live in the zone, and at which point you can access a 2 year exemption. Commercial vehicles, so vehicles that are owned by businesses that operate in the zone, are based in the zone, can also access an exemption. And then, of course, we have the Children's Hospital, and we have 2 other medical centres that offer out of hours or emergency services within the zone, and they will also be able to get an exemption. That exemption will be done by a voucher system, whereby you will, as a visitor or patient to those medical centres, you will be issued with a voucher that you can then credit online and wipe any charges. The other ones that we've just described, and most pertinent for you guys on the call, is the workers one, are available to apply online on our website now. We've already had some applications from the British Transport Police, and I would encourage you, if you think you're eligible, to get your application in as soon as possible. Pretty simple online portal. Create an account, specify which exemption you want, and then at the next stage you will be asked to provide some details about your vehicle and upload some documents. From beginning to end, not including kind of finding those documents, the process should take no more than 10 minutes. At the moment, my team are turning those round within a 48-hour period, so I'd encourage you, if you think you're eligible, to apply soon, because as we get closer to launch, we know human nature. We know that people will rush to submit applications closer to the launch. So please, if you are eligible, following this call, the website is on the last page. Please go and apply for your exemption. In addition to those exemptions where you're a worker or a resident, we also have exemptions for kind of more specialist vehicles. So emergency services vehicles, so that will be some of your British Transport vehicles, historic vehicles. It's important to note that people with blue badges do not get an automatic exemption. However, if your vehicle has a disabled passenger tax class, which is you get through various disability benefits, then you will have a national exemption from all clean air zones, and that's stated on your V5, your logbook. Motorcycles are exempt. And finally, community and school transport, so kind of your ring and ride, not-for-profit transport, will also have an exemption. We also have got £35 million from central government to provide support to stakeholders across the city. Again, the most relevant one to you guys on the call is the Scrappage scheme for workers. The way that this will work, and it's not available to apply just yet, but it will be before the zone goes live, is that you will apply to us with your non-compliant vehicle. If you wish to have it scrapped, you scrap that vehicle with a scrappage partner that we're in the process of procuring at the moment. They provide a certificate of destruction, you provide that to us, and then you get £2,000 off the price of a compliant vehicle at a kind of nominated dealership. Or if you decide that I no longer need this vehicle, then you can have that £2,000 and you can have that put on a Swift card. So we're calling it a mobility credit. So for public transport via TfWM Transport for West Midlands. So that scheme will be available to workers before the zone goes live. We're anticipating it to be very popular, and you can sign up on our website for a newsletter so that you're the first to know when that scheme goes live. We've got some more procurement things to do before we get it live, but we will be live in the coming months. We also have a fund for Hgvs and taxi drivers, but given the audience of this call, I will skip past that, but there's more information on our website. Gareth has already talked about how the Clean Air Zone kind of sits within a wider strategic plan for Birmingham City Council. So I just want to touch on Birmingham's transport plan, because that sits within our kind of aspirations about being net zero carbon neutral. So the Birmingham Transport Plan, which was published just over a year ago and has since been kind of updated with the emergency transport plan off the back of COVID-19, Has 4 main visions, and they're on screen, but I'll just run through them quickly, which is to reallocate road space away from private motor vehicles, give that space to people walking, cycling and using public transport. So you may already have seen some temporary cycle lanes with kind of wands or bollards put in, more bus priority across the city. These measures have been put in as a response to COVID. On my local high street, we have social distancing measures where the on-street parking has been removed to increase the size of the pavement, that sort of thing, because you have people queuing outside banks and supermarkets. It's been very welcome where I live. The next one is to transform the city centre, and I'll keep reiterating that, and that is to transform the city centre to give more emphasis and space to people walking, cycling and using public transport. So you may have heard in the media about this cells approach, whereby the city centre will be cut into cells and you will be able to drive into one but then not drive across to another. So let's use the example of you enter the city centre area kind of in Digbeth, do your business in Digbeth, and then you actually realise you need to go to the jewellery quarter. Well, you will not be able to drive straight across the city centre. You need to go out and use the ring road, but people walking, cycling and using public transport will. So making it more permeable and pleasant for people using those modes of transport. Prioritising active travel in local neighbourhoods, so that's outside of the city centre, with measures such as low traffic neighbourhoods, which have been introduced across the city, nationally getting quite a lot of coverage, and we have one in Kings Heath and some measures in Bourneville, Lascelles and Castle Vale. Whereby, again, re-emphasising that message, you're making it easier for people to walk and cycle these short journeys. We saw on one of Gareth's earlier slides the sheer volume of car journeys in this city that are less than 1 mile. These are the journeys that we need to convert. And the final one is just to try and manage demand, but using parking as a demand management tool. I always get that mouthful wrong. So that's removing all free car parking in the city centre. And there is also talk of a workplace parking levy, although that's a long way off at the moment. It requires a lot of work and scoping out. So that's where Birmingham is aiming to go, and the Clean Air Zone segues nicely. Is it kind of acting as an enabler of change for that? We know that we're in a climate emergency, and we're currently in a respiratory pandemic health emergency. So all these things fit together and are working towards a kind of cleaner, greener city. You can see on the screen there some of the other schemes that we're working on. So more electric vehicle charging across the city, hydrogen buses. There was a press release about this last week. They'll go onto sprint routes, servicing some of the Commonwealth Games venues, etc. And also a scheme to lease out more electric Hackney carriages to clean up that fleet, because it's not so easy for a private Hackney cab driver to green up, because there's only one electric Hackney cab on the market. So it's challenging, but there's lots of support out there. That marks the end of the slides. You can see here our website. I'm just going to come out of presentation mode, and then I should be able to see questions. I'm going to put myself on screen. So yeah, before I do that, Breathes is our website. You can go there, you can check your vehicle. That's the most important thing that you can do. You need to check if you're compliant or not compliant. If you're not compliant and you think you might be eligible, you can then apply for an exemption. And there's a wealth of other information on the website there. So I'm going to send myself live, so you're not just looking at the screen, you can see myself now and just check for some questions. At the moment, we haven't got any questions. We've just got people confirming that they can hear us. So I hope that the technology worked throughout. Gareth didn't interrupt me to say that it didn't. I'll give it a couple of minutes. If there aren't any questions, don't worry, that's fine. Hopefully that means that we've given an extensive, useful presentation. But if you think of any questions following the call, you can email cleanair@birmingham.gov.uk, or you should hopefully find the answer on our website. And we monitor that inbox daily. And as I say, myself or Gareth or other colleague Gemma will send around the slides, the recording and all the information following the call. So we'll do that in the coming days. When we do have a question, it's around public transport. Is public transport going to be improved before this is implemented? I only drive to work when public transport is not available, often on a Sunday. Yes, well, public transport is continually being improved. Birmingham City Council doesn't have control over timetabling with trains and buses. We do obviously work very closely with Transport for West Midlands and the operators. So it is, as we talked about, hydrogen buses going in, talking about increased capacity on the Cross City line, opening up of the Camp Hill line, so that's Kings Heath, Moseley, Kings Norton, so providing more train services, bus priority to make those bus services far easier to use and more appealing. Well, the example I always use is you never drive in central London. But when we used to go and visit central London and go to places, I'd go to visit my dad and we wouldn't dream of driving into London because the buses all had their own bus lanes and they go a lot faster than cars. Well, that's not the case for a lot of bus routes in Birmingham, but there is a lot of bus priority work going in, and this reallocation of road space, which the council can control, is helping as well. We've got metro improvements, so lots of public transport improvements coming in. They may not all be ready on June the 1st. We appreciate that sometimes that may prove a challenge, but as we talked about, the kind of public health emergency means we've already been delayed by 18 months by COVID and delays to the government vehicle checker. We can't delay any further. Unfortunately, infrastructure like new train stations and trams takes a long time, so it may be that there's some short-term pain, but there will be improvements to public transport, and as we've already touched upon, any revenue from the Clean Air Zone can potentially be used for that. Publish. That's a very good question. It says, will emergency vehicles still be able to go from cell to cell, or are they to be physically blocked? I don't know the answer to that question. It's a really good question. In the low traffic neighbourhoods that we've got in where I live at the moment, there is a physical bollard in the middle stopping people go through, but the emergency services can have a key to open them, and the bin men have a key, or I understand that the ambulance service have just decided that they'll just adjust their routes. I don't know the answer with the city centre. At the moment, they've just been put in with kind of lightweight cones, so I'd imagine they could just be moved. But long term, if you just want to send if you send that to connected at Birmingham, I'm just typing it in as a reply to you, birmingham.gov.uk. That's the team who are responsible for implementing the Birmingham Transport Plan. So in the old days, they sat next to us in the office. So if you email connected at birmingham.gov.uk, that's a really interesting question. I don't know the answer to. Great, thank you about the presentation. So I'm glad you found it useful. That's always good to know. I think there's a couple more. Yes, so this question about when working a night shift, like Gareth touched upon, if you began your night shift at 10 PM, so you entered the zone at 9:30, started your shift and then left at 6 AM the following day, then you would potentially be subject to, well, no, not potentially, you would be subject to 2 charges. Yes, it's absolutely something to be aware of, especially for shift workers in emergency services or in hospitality or the NHS. Yes, that is something that you need to be aware of. No, I don't think I've missed any. I'll just scroll back through. Okay, I will give it until 10:30 to see if any further questions come through. Otherwise, I'll end the call. So thank you very much for giving up your time today. I hope you found it useful. As I said at the start, if any of your colleagues registered but couldn't join, please, when we forward the email, please forward the email on to them. I've noticed that somebody said that they'll pass this to Jess in the reward team to share, so that's great. It's really important to have these kind of conversations. We're going to do as much as we can to raise awareness. There's 300 signs going up. We've got paid for advertising, radio adverts, all sorts, but we need help from employers and from the community in Birmingham to get the message out. So these sessions are invaluable. Doesn't look like any further questions. So from myself and Gareth, thank you very much for your time. Glad to hear that some of you found it useful. And I shall end the call now. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.